Sir John A. Macdonald is called the father of Confederation, but many Canadians feel he should be scorned for policies that profoundly hurt Indigenous peoples. Last year, this Montreal statue was painted blood red, and it's happened again this year. Other tributes across the country have been called into question. In August, Victoria took the unprecedented step of removing that city's public MacDonald's statue, while some applauded and others objected. More than 200 years after his birth, Sir John A. stirs passionate reactions in this country. The CBC's Nick Purdon met with people on both sides as he sought to find out how this polarizing figure from history can fit into Canada's future.
John A. John A.
Are you wondering what you're looking at?
John A. I wanted to confront you. I wanted to talk about Indian residential schools.
Think of this as a kind of historical showdown. In one corner, we have the ghost of Louis Riel, hero to Indigenous people for his rebellions against the Canadian government.
The world turns without us.
In the other corner, Sir John A. Macdonald, father of the country, fierce politician, and architect of Canada's residential schools.
After you had me killed.
Now, it's worth mentioning that Sir John A. had Riel executed just steps away from this exact spot in Regina, hence the noose in the hood. Oh, and the man dressed as Riel? That's Métis artist and university professor David Garneau.
This statue always arrests me. It comes as a shock because there isn't another one like it in the province. Why would citizens decide to put John A. Macdonald statue here in the place where Riel was hung? That shocks me. It's a provocation.
What is the provocation?
Provocation is to remind Indigenous people that shut up. Remember what happened to the last guy who stood up. So I think it's deliberately there to remind Indigenous people in the Regina area about John A. and Louis Riel.
Garneau tells me he's compelled to confront Sir John A. because his great-great-grandfather, Laurent Garneau, was part of the Métis resistance.
He was arrested, put in jail for 6 months, and was threatened with the hanging. So I grew up with that idea that that's a possibility, and it led to what I call the Great Silence. You know, Métis people just went underground at that point, assimilated. My family assimilated, just was quiet.
And things were quiet for Sir John A. too. That is, until pretty recently. It used to be that Sir John A. Macdonald was just the father of the country. That's it, that's all. Nobody really questioned his legacy, which is actually a lot more complicated. Sir John A. started the residential school system, for example, so he can be seen as a nation builder, but also as a racist. And there are plenty of people on both sides. And so the question is, how should we remember him? In Kingston, Ontario, where Sir John A. grew up and spent most of his life, it's like this. He's up there, way up there, in a place of honor. In fact, until recently, a crowd gathered here on his birthday every year to toast him. And that's why he's Warren Everett, who's head of the Kingston Historical Society, never missed a gathering. Is he someone you'd love to meet?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to. Well, I was about to say I'd like to have a drink with him, but I don't think we're supposed to say that now. He is the father of Confederation, and it was his drive and ambition and vigorous approach to this that stopped us being a colony and became a dominion. And I'm not sure where we would be if it hadn't been for him.
Warren understands that Sir John A.'s policies towards Indigenous people had serious problems. But he also insists
he shouldn't be the lightning rod, because if he is, so is Laurier, so is Borden, so is Bennett. You know, everybody up to Pearson. While they may not have started it, they certainly didn't stop it.
So you worry that if it starts with MacDonald, where does it end?
Well, yeah,
everything will be removed.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you could have a growth industry in wrecking, but I think if this statue came down, and then you start to just erode the legacy and the heritage of the country.
There you have it. MacDonald's fans want to keep honoring him. The other side wants him gone. And if you think this is just some abstract debate that doesn't affect real people, meet Paul Fortier. Paul owns this pub in Kingston that used to be named after Sir John A. Macdonald. Then the protesters arrived.
So they had Sir John A. sort of hanging on a stick, with a noose around his neck, and they didn't burn it here, but they took it into the park and set that on fire afterwards.
Paul and his staff were afraid for the bar, and themselves. They heard the protesters denouncing the way Indigenous people were treated by Sir John.
They came and they chanted and they yelled at the customers who were coming in and out of the pub. And
What did they yell?
oh, things like, you know, you're supporting a colonial business.
Paul thought the best thing to do was to listen to the protesters. So he changed the name of his pub from Sir John's Public House to just the Public House. But that wasn't the end of it. After that, the supporters of Sir John A. were angry.
People were coming into the pub and saying that we shouldn't have done this, that we had caved to the sort of liberal-minded individuals. It was some very hurtful messages, death threats that were left on the telephone.
You got death threats?
Yeah.
What would
Yes.
they say?
You want to watch your back. You don't know when it's going to happen, but you're going to be gone.
Death threats?
See?
How is it that people are so passionate about Sir John A. Macdonald that they'll do things like that? Well, let's find out. Back in Regina, I meet Patrick Johnson. Now, Patrick is up on criminal mischief charges for some of the things he's done to Sir John A.
I brought the sledgehammer in. I gave it 3 whacks on this side, 3 whacks on the other. Nothing really moved. It was just like a big din, like a bell ringing.
That's right. In the middle of the night, Patrick brought a sledgehammer down here and tried to destroy the statue.
It was exhilarating, kind of terrifying, but something I needed to do.
Patrick explains he needed to do it because he doesn't like the way Indigenous people are treated today.
Like, for me, it's appalling that we celebrate our country, Canada, as being civilized, and yet we let a certain portion of our people live in poverty, without clean drinking water, without adequate housing, education.
And then, as we're talking, the debate over Sir John erupts. A man rides by, recognizes Patrick, and yells that he's a vandal.
So you felt strongly enough that we were talking to Patrick and you rode by and yelled that out.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to say to Patrick?
Well, I just disagree with his protest, and I'm really not into vandalism, and I just saw that as vandalism. I think it's not personal, but I think it's juvenile, and I don't think, I think there's better ways to have those debates.
You know, really the statue is just the surface of it. I'm trying to bring light, advance the mystery.
Then why would you argue that it needs to be taken down?
I feel that it is a threat to people that do not support this in a public place.
I don't think
No, but do you know what? It's okay that you don't, because you're from a white society.
Yeah, but
you're not imagining what it's like to be First Nations there.
See, but you're also assuming that I'm incapable of even having empathy for these people.
Listening to the argument, I can't help but wonder, how is it that Sir John A. Macdonald has become the most controversial figure in the country? And what are we really arguing about when we argue about him? Those sound like questions for a historian. Meet Jim Dashuk.
Well, there's no question that Sir John A. is the father of Canada. Having done 30 years of research into Indigenous history and the relationship between Indigenous people and the Canadian state, he's also the father of the dysfunctional country we live in today. His policies have a direct reverberation into the present.
And Jim sees a warning in the debate over the statue.
So if we can't have a discussion about the statues, about the legacy of Macdonald's policies, we're not ready to deal with justice issues and transfer of land and wealth and education and health. Those things are real and they need to be addressed. So if we can't deal with a statue in a park in a spirit of understanding, I'm not really seeing reconciliation in the near future.
Maybe Dashuk is right.
They don't want you here!
It is tempting to dismiss the conflict over the statues as being about the past. But maybe it's really more about the future and where Canada is headed.
Just down the road is the retirement home.
For me, that statue is like a message from the past delivered to the present and onto the future, and it's the imposition of an old will. And we can decide to accept or reject it as we would anything.
Let's go. Let's go.
David Garneau doesn't want to destroy Sir John A.'s statue.
Anytime now.
He wants to retire it. He wants it set up in a museum so Sir John is remembered,
Enjoy your stay.
but for the good things he did and the bad. Nick Purdon, CBC News, Regina.